Hi, welcome to Bright Threads in the Tapestry. My name is Varsha, and this is a series in which I piece together the brightest threads in my favorite stories and analyze them to figure out what makes them shine. In this introductory episode, I'd like to go over some introductory aspects of the podcast. Like, I'll talk about what inspired the name of the podcast, what inspired me to start it in the first place, what I plan to do with each episode, and most importantly, what books I plan to cover in the first few months of the podcast. Now, getting the really simple things out of the way first, I plan to post this both as a podcast on a podcast platform as well as on my YouTube channel, which I currently am running. It's called Reading by the Rainy Mountain for any of you not watching this on YouTube. So I will be hosting this on both platforms, and I plan to record an episode once every week. In terms of what the podcast is, basically what I have been noticing is there are these little pieces of information in a book, usually, that connect together and bring out larger themes in the book. And sometimes it's also through some very beautiful writing, or the theme that comes together is really brilliantly done through these tiny pieces of information that are placed throughout the book. So what I'd like to do in this podcast is look at all those pieces of the theme or a thread in a book or a subplot, anything, any sub portion of a book that particularly resonated with me. Look at the pieces that make up the whole, which sometimes make up a whole that's bigger than its parts, and talk about it. Usually gush about it because, these are about my favorite books. I've been reading the Fionavar Tapestry, and that series is so beautifully written. It's Guy Gabriel Kay's first set of published books. It's a trilogy, and I've read the first two books, and I am yet to start the third book. I plan to in a few weeks from now. And that series is actually what inspired both this discussion series as well as the name for the podcast. So Fionavar Tapestry, the tapestry portion of the name comes from there. It's a world in which the creator weaves a tapestry. That's how people's fates are designed, and brightly woven is often how characters complement each other on a job well done. And it is possible, though I can't be sure right now, that bright threads in and of itself is also a phrase that's used in the book. But I thought it would be apt to choose a name based on a book series that I'm currently loving and which actually inspired me to start this discussion in the first place. There is a scene about 2/3 of the way into The Summer Tree, which is the first book of the Fionavar Tapestry, after reading which I had to stop and think about who I could gush about this passage to. And coming up with almost no one, I decided I'm just going to talk to the internet about it, and therefore the series. So the first episode will, understandably, feature that passage that made me stop and think and admire Guy Gabriel Kay's writing so much that I wanted to go gush about it to anyone who could listen. So that brings me to what each episode might be structured, how each episode might be structured, So I will have passages that I look at. Often, the most common types that I've marked out so far for discussion feature multiple passages. They go across multiple short segments of a book that put together form a beautiful whole that I'd like to look at. But just as often, almost, there are these long passages that are extremely beautifully written and I want to break it down piece by piece and talk about everything I learned from it, see what makes those passages so effective, or just sit down and admire it for how beautiful it is. So I already mentioned Guy Gabriel Kay as an author who will feature prominently in this discussion series. I am 2/3 of the way through Fionavar Tapestry, and I have several passages marked out for discussion already. And as I go through the third book, I'm sure I'll find more to talk about. Eventually, when I'm done, we're probably talking a few months out from now, I will be reading other books by Guy Gabriel Kay. I'm working my way through his work in publication order. So I'll be reading Tigana next, and I don't remember what comes after. It's probably A Brightness Long Ago. But anyway, as I work my way through GGK's work, I will feature anything that I admire into this podcast. And I must say, I've just become a huge fan of Guy Gabriel Kay's writing with just the first 2 books. And these are his first 2 books. So I cannot wait to see what he did as he presumably got better as an author. Now, 2 other series that I have been reading recently and loving, and which I will definitely feature significantly in this podcast series as well, is our Wars of Light and Shadow by Jani Wirtz and the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson. The Wars of Light and Shadow, I have read the first 2 books so far, and I'm about to start the 3rd book. And Jani Wirtz's writing is so brilliant, and she has lots of descriptions, particularly of a certain character playing an instrument, that are brilliantly done. And then there are descriptions of magic in the world that I think are fantastic, and each one brings out the nature of the world a different way. We learn something new about the world in each description of the magic, and I think they're great examples of how to world build by showing a lot and telling very little. So I will be featuring a lot of Jani Wirtz's work in this series as well. And then the Malazan Book of the Fallen is a huge recent favorite of mine. I have been reading, well, I say recent, but I've been reading the series for nearly 4 years now, and I've become a big fan. This has recently become my favorite series of all time, and a very large part of it, of course, is because of Stephen Erickson's writing. And I've highlighted and marked off so many passages in the last 8 books as I've been working my way through this series, and I'm excited to finally have the opportunity to break most of it down. It's going to take me a long time, but hey, that's what podcasts are for, right? So I'm going to go over most of the passages in this series as well. Now, I am going to start because I am on the 9th book at the moment, and I've just recently finished book 8. I will probably start with passages from those books, the last 3 books, and then I have a reread scheduled with a few folks on the Page Chewing forum. I'll post a link below if you're interested in checking out that forum. It's a great place for people to meet who love talking about books and, make plans for reading books together and so on. And we've put a reading group together for Malazan Book of the Fallen, and there is currently an ongoing reading group for Wars of Light and Shadow. I'm part of the Wars of Light and Shadow group, and I'm going to be part of the Malazan group. It's an incredible bunch of people, and it's basically been my favorite time to read recently. That's been wonderful. Do consider checking out the Page Chewing forum if you're interested in participating in any of these group discussions, or asking to buddy read others. I'll post links in the description of this episode. So anyway, once the reading group starts for Malazan, we'll be starting from book 1 of Book of the Fallen, and I will probably be reading some of Ian Esselman's books on the side. So whatever strikes me then as something worth discussing in this series, I will bring up, and I'm sure there will be plenty of that. So these are the 3 authors that I plan to feature primarily, who inspired this series, whose work I've been dying to discuss, and I'm glad to finally have an avenue to start these discussions. And also, if you are a reader of any of these series and have your own favorite passages you'd like to discuss, I'd love to have you on as a guest. Please reach out to me. I'll post my emails again in the description, or the about page of my YouTube channel. Again, Reading by the Rainy Mountain has ways to reach out to me directly. I'd love to hear from you. Discussing books is my favorite thing to do, other than reading them, of course. So apart from these 3 authors, I also plan to discuss 2 others on a sort of like palette cleanser or one-off basis. And those are Lavi Tidar, who is an author who's new to me. I've read 2 of his books, and he discusses a lot of very interesting themes in some extremely clever ways. And I've loved his work. He's a new favorite author, even though I've only read 2 of his books, and I plan to, work my way through his entire backlog, or is that what it's called? I don't remember what the word is for when we read an author's back catalog. I'm going to call it backlog. But I'm going to read all of his published works. I'm going to work my way through it. And the 2 books that I have read already, Martian Suns and Central Station, again, I've got large blocks of text marked off as passages that I love to come back to and think about, or love to talk to other people about. So, those are great to bring here. Both of them are really short books. So if you'd like to listen in on those episodes, absolutely do check out Lavi Tidar. He's a brilliant author, and I'm excited to read more of his work. And finally, Terry Pratchett. I've been working my way through the Discworld series. I'm currently rereading Equal Rights. I'm reading them in publication order. And I had read the first 6 books already, but I'm rereading them because I'm listening to them again on audio, since the new audiobooks have come out. And as I work my way through them, I might have the one-off joke that I'd like to chuckle about on the internet again. So so those are the authors whom I'm planning to discuss in the near future for this podcast. Planning to run the first season for a few months, featuring mainly the first 3 books by Guy Gavriel Kay, namely the Fionavar Tapestry, the first 3 books of the Wars of Light and Shadow series by Janie Wirtz, the last 3 books of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, that should be interesting, and the first few Discworld books, and the first 2 Central Station books, Martian Suns and Central Station by Lavi Tidar. I will try to keep the first few episodes somewhat spoiler-free for the Fionavar Tapestry and the Wars of Light and Shadow. I'll pick passages that are only mild spoilers, or spoil sort of insignificant or seemingly insignificant aspects of the story. With Wars of Light and Shadow, it's hard to tell what feels insignificant now might become extremely significant later. But hey, I'm only on the 3rd book, so if it feels insignificant to me 3 books in, it's probably not spoiling the first 3 books, at least. So that's what so I'll pick passages that don't spoil much, so they can be sort of something to help you decide, if you're listening to this, if you want to read these books with me. I am going to be reading and rereading large sections so I can plan these episodes. So I'd love for you to come with me on this journey. Guy Gavriel Kay's writing is excellent. Janie Wirtz's writing is beautiful. Stephen Erickson won't disappoint you, although that one's a harder sell because I'm doing the last 3 books to start with. But do consider joining us on the group read if you've been thinking of checking that series out. So the first episode will be posted a few days from now, and I'll post 1 episode every week after that, possibly on the same day. I'm planning to, and I'll probably alternate between Fionavar Tapestry, Wars of Light and Shadow, and Malazan. And maybe every 6 or 9 episodes, throw in interludes with Lavi Tidar and Terry Pratchett. So that's how I plan to schedule this. We'll see how it goes. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you will join me in the first episode of Bright Threads. I forgot what the name of the series was there for a second. I hope you will join me for the first episode of Bright Threads in the Tapestry in a few days. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.